Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat, and today we're talking about one of my favorite mechanics, Cascade, which is whenever you cast a spell, you get to cast another spell for free as long as it has lower CMC than the card you just cast. What's really cool about our commander Imoti is that it gives all of our spells with CMC 6 or greater Cascade. So now all of our spells that are huge have Cascade. We can cast a lot more free spells, so let's jump right into it. Our commander is Imoti, Celebrant of Bounty. For 3 green and blue, we have a 3/1 Naga Druid. It has Cascade, so whenever you cast this spell, we're going to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost, put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order, and then it also has spells you cast with CMC 6 or greater have Cascade. So we Cascade when we cast our commander, and our huge spells are going to have Cascade like I mentioned before, so naturally I just went a little bit crazy and have a lot of huge spells in the deck. So let's talk about cards that already have Cascade. We have Apex Devastator, Annoyed Altasaur, Forceful Denial, and Natural Reclamation. What's really sweet about Apex Devastator is that it has Cascade 4 times, so when we have our commander out, that's going to be 5 Cascades, or 5 extra spells that we get for free. Forceful Denial is a counter spell, but it also has Cascades, so if we were to Cascade in the spell, we may cast it, so we don't have to counter our previous spell, which is really nice. Or if we're countering an opponent's spell, we still get another free card from this removal. And then we have Natural Reclamation. If we just destroy an artifact or enchantment, we get another free spell just for doing what we already want to do, which is to take care of our opponent's threats. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards in this deck with cards like Recurring Insight, Treasure Cruise, Tattoo of a Benthic Druid, Prime Speaker Zagana, and Thunderous Snapper. Recurring Insight is going to let us draw cards equal to the number of cards in target opponent's hand, and it has Rebound, which means we can cast it again at our next upkeep for free. Treasure Cruise is a lot of mana, it's 8, right? But we can also have Delve, which is 1 mana less we have to pay if we exile a card from our graveyard, but what's really sweet, it has 8 CMC, so we get to Cascade from this card, so anything 7 or less CMC we get for free. That's in our library. And then we get to draw 3 cards as well. Tattoo of a Benthic Druid. When a land enters our battlefield, we're going to gain 1 life and draw a card. Prime Speaker Zagana. When it enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 counters, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Well, if we have Apex Devastator on the battlefield, it's going to get 10 +1/+1 counters on it, so we're going to draw 11 cards when this enters the battlefield. And then we have Thunderous Snapper. If we cast a spell with CMC 5 or greater, we get to draw a card, and that's going to happen a lot in this deck, so we get to draw cards and Cascade for free. With all the cards that we're drawing, we're going to need to be able to put all the lands from our hand onto the battlefield, and we could do this with cards like Azusa Lost But Seeking, Wayward Swordtooth, Oracle of Moldiah, and Dryad of the Elysian Grove. This is going to let us play additional lands, so we get all of those lands out of our hand. That means we're going to get even more mana, and we can do that with cards like Zendikar Resurgent and Regal Behemoth. Our lands are going to tap for an additional mana, and so with all this extra mana, we're going to cast huge spells, and that means huge Eldrazi's with cards like Kozilek Butcher of Truth, It That Betrays, Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger, and Pathraiser of Ulamog. It's really nice that they are huge creatures, but the CMC is what I really care about. With It That Betrays, it's coming in at our highest CMC in the deck. It has Annihilator 2, and whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So if they sack a fetch land, that's going to come under our control, and that can be really silly. Or if they're just an aristocrat deck, and they're sacrificing whatever creature, we're going to get those as well. Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger comes in at 10 CMC, it's a 10/10 when we cast it, so that means even when we Cascade into it, we get to exile 2 target permanents. That means lands are an option as well. It's indestructible, and when it attacks, the defending player exiles the top 20 cards of his or her library. This is a devastating card to have in the deck. We can even steal our opponent's cards with cards like Knowledge Exploitation and Acquire. We can search their library for an instant or sorcery, and then we can play that for free. If we're able to Cascade into these spells, that's even crazier, so it's like we're casting 2 spells for free with stuff like this. We have Woodland Bellower. When it enters the battlefield, we can search our library for a non-legendary green creature with CMC 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. And this can be any creature in our library with CMC 3 or less as long as it's non-legendary. So if we're needing some lands on our battlefield or we need some ramp, we can find cards like Nissa Vastwood Seer, Lotus Cobra, Fierce Empath, Farhaven Elf. Whatever we need, we can find it with Woodland Bellower for whatever the situation is. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. This is a newer card from Commander Legends. When Sakashima of 1,000 Faces enters the battlefield, we can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of another creature, and then it also gives the legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. So we can have this enter the battlefield as our commander, which is the main intention, or if we just have some other creature that's really exceptional. If it enters the battlefield as our commander, that means whenever we cast a spell with CMC 6 or greater, we get 2 Cascade triggers off of our huge spells, which is insane. We also have Amanatu's Augury. We're going to exile the top 8 cards of our library. We can put a land from among them onto the battlefield, so we're ramping from this. And then we can put, for each non-land card type, we can cast that for free. So that means we can cast a sorcery, instant, enchantment, creature, you name it. That's a crazy spell to have. We have Thrix, the Sudden Storm. It's going to make it where if our spells are 5 CMC or greater, they cost 1 less and they can't be countered. Making them cost 1 less doesn't affect Cascade. It's only going to affect cards we're casting from our hand, but what's really important is that our spells can no longer be countered if they're 5 CMC or greater, so those huge spells we're casting, nobody can mess with those. Kodama of the East Tree. This is a card I really have to recommend. When another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So when we Cascade, if it's a permanent, we're going to put it onto the battlefield. We can then look at our hand and say, okay, is there a permanent with equal or lesser CMC that I want to put onto the battlefield? This can be a land. So all those lands that we have in our hand, we're just dropping them on the battlefield. That's more mana we have to cast huge spells, or we just get value from different permanents we have in our hand. And we can take extra turns with cards like Part the Water Veil, Karn's Temporal Sundering, and Beacon of Tomorrow. What's really important about Karn's Temporal Sundering is that we can only take an extra turn if we have a legendary creature or planeswalker on the battlefield. And then Beacon of Tomorrows is just going to shuffle in our library after we cast it, so it's likely that we can cascade into it again if we're casting CMC 9 or greater spells. And last I want to mention the win cons of the deck. We have Pathbreaker Ibex, an archetype of imagination. So when Pathbreaker Ibex attacks creatures you control, gain trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if we have Apex Devastator out, our creatures are getting +10/+10 and trample. So that's going to be insane and super mean. Archetype of imagination, it gives our creatures flying, but what's really important is that creatures our opponents control lose flying and can't have or gain flying. So we're going to get through with all of our creatures because they can no longer block, unless they have cards that have reach that are going to be able to block our flying creatures, but it's likely they don't. So these two cards are really going to help us get through with damage, and we can also find these with Fierce Empath, and we can find Fierce Empath with Woodland Bellower. So you see, everything flows into each other with Cascade. We get free spells, and it's a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, hit that like button, comment below what you think of this deck, and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.